real quick, before I even say anything, before I even do anything, I have a question that I want you to answer in the comment section below. The question is, do you think that Derek Carr is good enough to win a Super Bowl? Just honestly answer it. It's going to come important at the end of this video, but I want you to ask yourself that question. Do you think Derek Carr is good enough to win a Super Bowl? Not, do you think Derek Carr is better than Baker Mayfield? No, this has nothing to do with Baker Mayfield right now. I am asking the question. Do you think Derek Carr is a good enough quarterback in the AFC that's loaded with quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl? Do you think he's Matt Stafford level? Like, where do you think he is? But let me know your thoughts about Derek Carr right now. And then keep them there. And then remember those thoughts, because we'll come back to those thoughts. But keep that in mind while we talk about this video. But that's the biggest question to start this video. That's the baseline I want to get, because a lot's going to depend on your answer to that. But is Derek Carr, his level of quarterback play, is that good enough to win a Super Bowl? Let me know. All right. Now that you guys have let me know, it will be interesting to see what you guys do put down there. Let's talk about Derek Carr. Derek Carr has been one of the names that people have been talking about potentially being a replacement to Baker Mayfield. As you guys know, in this series, what I am doing is going over all the guys that we have talked about as replacements or potential replacements or upgrades for Baker Mayfield if it comes to that point. Or, if you just want to upgrade at the quarterback position, who would be an upgrade, and where's that line, right, between better than Baker and upgradable to make this team, make the jump that the Rams did, presumably, right? So that's what we're doing here. I'm putting every single quarterback under the same exact microscope, the same lens that I put Baker Mayfield under. So if you think I was unfair to Baker, baby, I'm unfair to everybody, because I do the same thing to everybody, which technically doesn't make me unfair. But let's talk about Derek Carr. And to talk about Derek Carr first, we actually need to talk about Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford. Why? Well, I'll explain why. When we talk about making a move at quarterback and upgrading at quarterback, I think that's the leap that a lot of people have in mind. Going from a guy like Jared Goff to going to Matt Stafford, right? Now, there are varying opinions on how good Matt Stafford is, and if he wins the Super Bowl, it's going to get out of control. So I want to make sure this video gets out before the Super Bowl. But most people, there are some people who think he's like top 5 or top 7. That's ridiculous. Nobody really, not a lot of people think that. Most people think Matt Stafford is around, that fringe top 10 area. It's about where Baker Mayfield played last year, right? Where I was saying Baker Mayfield is around the top 10, at worst. Last year in 2020, he was 12th best quarterback in the NFL. Best case scenario, you could probably say he was 8th. But that range, right? That's where Matt Stafford's lived his whole career, is that range. So is there a quarterback that exists in that range that's going to improve the team at the same level that Jared Goff and Matt Stafford did? Now, I've been tracking. I've went through a bunch of quarterback QBR and PFF grades, and what I have found is that according to PFF and QBR, these are two separate stats that don't rely on each other, Jared Goff, when he was on the Rams, right, and in the McVay system, would be good for 8 bad starts a year. Just straight up 8 starts that would grade in QBR and PFF underneath a starting level, right? So that's what Jared Goff would get you, a solid 8 bad games. 8 is good enough to make the playoffs with. 8 is good enough to advance in the playoffs with. Baker Mayfield's range is 8 to 10 bad games throughout his entire career. Now, Jared Goff really only played with Sean McVay and really only had real success with Sean McVay. But under that system, Sean McVay was able to get him to be a 8 bad game quarterback. I don't think 8 bad games, though, is good enough to win a Super Bowl or get to a Super Bowl, but it is good enough to advance in the playoffs, right? Like 8 bad games is the minimum I think you need to have playoff hopes in your quarterback. It's why, even though I'm not like the biggest believer in Baker Mayfield right now, I still think the Browns can make the playoffs next year with him because he's still capable of only giving you 8 bad starts. It's not a good number, but it's not a bad number, right? It's a good enough number to justify a quarterback being a starter of an NFL team. Matt Stafford is somebody who, on the bad end, will give you about 8 bad games a year. On the good end, he'll give you about 6 bad games a year. That number 6 is important because I think 6 is the minimum amount of bad games that you can give as a quarterback in a year, or at least that 6 to 8 range, right? You can't have more than 8, and you probably aren't going to have less than 6, but 6 to 8, that's Super Bowl worthy range, right? If you can only have 6 to 8 bad games in a season, hopefully closer to 6, if you can have only 6 to 8 bad games in a season, like if you have 7 bad games, you can go to the Super Bowl. If you have 6 bad games, you can go to the Super Bowl. 8, it's going to be real tough. Unless you have like a great team around you, it's going to be real tough. But that's the range, right, for quarterback. And that's what Matt Stafford did for the Rams, right? He took those 8 bad games and then just threw 2 of them out, and then all of a sudden, boom. It's really that small and subtle of a difference. And what the Rams did was the floor was still the same as Jared Goff, right? Jared Goff's floor wasn't ridiculously low or anything, but the ceiling got up a little bit, right? 6 to 8. That's what you want to do. Now, Baker is capable of giving you one of those type seasons. He's done it 2 times where he's giving you a season where it's 8, 6 to 8, that range, 6 to 8. The problem is he's also given us 2 seasons where it's like 10 or 11, right? That's the part that bothers me about trusting Baker. It isn't the high end. I know what the high end is good enough to win the Super Bowl with. It's just I don't know when that high end is coming, because some years he's capable of only giving you 6 bad games. Some years he will give you 11 or 10, and that's not acceptable under any circumstances to give 11 or 10 bad games as a franchise quarterback, no matter who you are. Case in point, Jared Goff this year, his range of bad games, 11 to 14. It's going to tank a team. You can't make the playoffs with 11 bad games or 10 bad games. I bring this up when it comes to Derek Carr because Derek Carr's average is 8 to 9. Baker's average is 8 to 10. Those are 2 similar of averages for me to be excited about. The floor is a little bit higher with Derek Carr. He's not going to give you double-digit bad games, so you're not going to be a straight-up awful team. But, the ceiling is a little limited there. It's a little bit more limited than Baker Mayfield's ceiling. So bringing in Derek Carr would sacrifice a little bit of ceiling there. Now, me personally, I would be willing to deal with a lower ceiling if that meant I got an extremely low floor. Right? Like if the floor was 8 games, but the ceiling was 7, if the range was 7 to 8, I would live with that over 8 to 10, if you feel what I'm feeling. But 8 to 9, I'm not feeling that with Derek Carr. And again, the point that I have about Derek Carr and the ceiling being a little bit lower than Baker Mayfield is that Derek Carr has been in the league for 7 years. According to PFF, he has the same amount of elite games that Baker has had in 4, right? So again, the ceiling is different with these 2 quarterbacks, right? On average, I think there's an argument you can make that Derek Carr is a better quarterback because on average he does play better, but football isn't played on average, it's played per game. And the fact is that Baker can either play much better than Derek Carr or much worse than Derek Carr on a given start, which makes it hard to gauge if he's better than Derek Carr by just watching him. But that's the roller coaster we live in with Baker sometimes. So basically what I'm telling you is that when you look at Derek Carr and you look at Baker Mayfield, you're really looking at 2 very similar players, right? One is a little bit more consistent, but doesn't have as high as a ceiling. Another one's a little bit more erratic, but does have a higher ceiling. But they're very similar players. And the reason I wanted to ask you guys if Derek Carr is the kind of quarterback you can win a Super Bowl with is that if you think the answer is yes, you can win a Super Bowl with Derek Carr, you really shouldn't want to move off Baker Mayfield at this point, right? Like, because they're very similar players. If you think you could do that in the AFC with Derek Carr, you might as well keep Baker Mayfield, because I think Derek Carr is the future for Baker Mayfield, right? Like, I think that's who Baker Mayfield is most likely to become, is Derek Carr. When you look at the PFF grades, when you look at the QBR, when you look at some of these other numbers, they're very similar in a way. They have some specific differences. Carr is better in some areas than Baker, and I'll tell you what those areas are. All right, so the things that Carr does that you could say is better than Baker Mayfield is, one, he has put up similar stats and similar numbers to Baker, but he's been in much worse situations. Now, one of the things that I push back on when people, I feel like disingenuously just to defend Baker say, is when they say that Baker hasn't had help around him. I think that's erroneous. Baker has always had great help when it comes to offensive lines, like even the bad offensive lines he were on. You could go back to the PFF grades. The pass blocking was still top half of the league, right? Even those teams with Greg Robinson in 2019, the pass blocking wasn't the issue. We know that Baker holds on to the ball a lot, right? Like, nobody gets sacked 9 times and holding on to the ball isn't an issue. Joe Burrow got sacked 9 times. Holding on to a ball is a little bit of an issue for him. So we know that Baker creates sacks, and you look at his sack to pressure number, it's one of the highest in the NFL. We know that Baker does that. So he has not had bad offensive lines in his career. He has had not great offensive lines and then one of the best offensive line years of all time, but he has never had bad offensive line play. He has had great running back play every single year, like top of the line running back play, and then he has had average wide receiver play, right? Like, he hasn't had great wide receiver play, but he hasn't had awful wide receiver play. It could be better, though, for Baker Mayfield. Carr, on average, Carr did not have that kind of help in Oakland. Early, he did with pass. Like, he had some really good pass blocking early in his career, but ever since, like, the last 3 years of his career, it's been bad for him. So you can make the argument that Carr does look similar to Baker, but Baker has been in better situations, and that you put Carr in a better situation, you might get a better result because of some specific stats, right? Carr is better at not taking sacks than Baker Mayfield. The sack to pressure number is drastically different for these two. Baker Mayfield, I believe he's at 21.2% or something like that. It's one of the highest in the league. His career average is close to that. Derek Carr is much less than that. So he does not take as many sacks. He's much better about not getting sacked. Derek Carr has less turnover-worthy plays. His career average for big-time throws is not higher than Baker Mayfield's, but if you look at 2021, he had a lower turnover-worthy play percentage and a higher big-time throw percentage. So, he still gives you enough big-time throws to be, not Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Derek turns the ball over less. He's never peaked higher than 13th in interception percentage in his 7 NFL seasons. Baker's only been below 13th one time in 2020 in his 4 years. So Derek Carr much better about not turning over the football than Baker Mayfield. Derek Carr on a throw-by-throw basis is more accurate with ball placement than Baker. Baker can place the ball into tighter windows, like on any given throw. But if we're talking about people who just consistently put the ball where it's supposed to be, Derek Carr is much better than that with Baker Mayfield. Ever since they started charting on target percentage, Derek Carr's been in the top 10. He's never been higher than 19th in bad throw percentage. Baker's best year when it comes to bad throw percentage is 16th, right? So, like, the worst year of Derek Carr is very close to the best year of Baker Mayfield when it comes to bad throw percentage. Again, he's on a throw-by-throw basis a much more accurate quarterback. Now, he's not asked to throw the ball as far as Baker, but it's not such a drastic different number that it makes up for that difference in on-target percentage and bad throw percentage. His fourth quarter splits, they're really not that much different than like Kirk Cousins, but they're better than Baker Mayfield's, who we have established has pretty awful fourth quarter splits. And that's the real argument for Derek Carr. The argument for Derek Carr is that he is better than what he has been able to show in Las Vegas or Oakland, both places he's played, and that if you put him in a better situation, that he will be better than Baker Mayfield because he takes less sacks and he's more accurate per throw. You will get more consistent quarterback play out of Derek Carr. You're not going to get the highs, the insane throws that Baker can give you sometimes, but you'll get more. You won't miss the layups, right? Sometimes Baker misses the layups, and that's an issue with Baker. But Derek Carr, not somebody who misses the layups. He's not going to make the deep three that Baker would make at times, but, you know, he will make the layups. That's what Derek Carr brings to you. I have some things about Derek Carr that I would worry about if the Browns made a move for him. One, even though he's more consistent on a play-to-play basis, his play can get very streaky at times. Similarly to Baker, I think both of these quarterbacks are both rhythm guys. Like, they need to be in rhythm. If you disrupt their rhythm, you disrupt their game, and they are very capable of having a clunker. The red zone for Derek Carr is a huge flag. Baker is a much better red zone quarterback in the last 2 seasons. So even in counting 2021, Baker was better in the red zone than Derek Carr. And this is interesting, right? Derek Carr does not turn the ball over as much as Baker Mayfield, but when Derek Carr does turn the ball over, it's in the red zone. Again, that tells you he's just not a very good red zone quarterback. Now, some people might say, hey, I'll take the red zone deficiency and just use Nick Chubb like crazy in the red zone and not worry about it and take what Derek Carr can do to get me to the red zone, right? Versus Baker, who might, you know, turn the ball over more often or not, right? Like, that's kind of the issue. When I'm talking about the playoffs and what you need to win in the playoffs, you need a quarterback who can win in the red zone, in my opinion. Derek Carr, he's not a winner in the red zone. He's not that kind of guy. So that is a huge red flag to me. So with Derek Carr, there is some upside to bringing him in. Because some of those numbers are promising, right? The on-target percentage and the things that he's specifically only one in control of, that is promising. I can understand why somebody would want to see what could happen if you put him in a better situation, in a better offensive line like Cleveland has. But on the other hand, I have to admit, and again, y'all know I'm not a Baker lover, even though I'm going to be accused of this because I'm not making a negative point on him. And I'm going to be accused of being a hater too, because I'm not saying he's going to be the MVP next year or whatever. So, you know, I'm the bad guy no matter what when it comes to the Baker Mayfield conversation. But the reality is that I think the only difference between Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield is that Derek Carr has been in the league 7 years and Baker's only been in the league 4. I think once once Baker gets to 7 years, he's going to look like Derek Carr, which is why I asked you that question. Do you think you can win a Super Bowl and Derek Carr's your quarterback? Because if the answer is yes, you think you can win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield. Therefore, you don't really need to trade for Derek Carr. Now, again, Derek Carr today, like if I had to make a bet, and it weren't like a trade, right? If I was just asked Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, 1 season to win a Super Bowl, I would pick Derek Carr over Baker because I kind of have more confidence in knowing what I'm going to get out of Derek Carr. So I can plan for the bad parts and then also, you know, lift up the good parts with him. Like, I know what's coming. The problem with Baker is what's coming could either be really good or it can be really bad, but there's no way of knowing, right? Because it's erratic. It is erratic when he has a good season or a bad season. Again, it's hard to count on somebody like that because you don't know. I just would love with Baker Mayfield to just get some consistency. Like, honest to God, just put 2 seasons together because that would just give me so much more confidence in him. But the fact that he has not put two good seasons back together makes this such a difficult process. And I think that has a lot to do with him being in his early career. I think the peaks and valleys, I think as he gets older, the peaks and valleys are going to kind of close in a little bit, and it's going to start averaging out around Derek Carr. But that's kind of who Baker is. So I don't know if it would justify trading for him. So I probably wouldn't do it unless you think Baker Mayfield is about to fall off a cliff after 2021, which is a reasonable belief. He was terrible in 2021. So that might be a catalyst to him, like just something broke with him that season and then he's never the same again, right? But if you expect him to kind of bounce back, not back to 2020 form, but like back to normal, bad and good Baker Mayfield stuff, then that's probably who he's going to become. But if you do think he's going to fall off a cliff, then yeah, make the trade for Derek Carr. But that's what I would think of it. I don't know how high. I wouldn't trade like a first round pick for Derek Carr. I would probably like at best feel like giving a third round pick. And I don't think that the Raiders would go for something that low. So I don't think it's going to happen with Derek Carr. Because I just don't think the upgrade is big enough to justify giving that many assets up, right? So that's my thoughts on Derek Carr. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think it's something that's justifiable. I think at that point, if you're asked to give up a first or a second for Derek Carr, you're better off just gambling on Baker Mayfield and just keeping your assets and seeing what happens down the line. But that's my thoughts on Derek Carr. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Let's have a great day. Have a good night.